Hello, Void. Sorry about the later post today. I didn't get a chance to record till kind of late on, but this is still my fourth video for the month. I'm just a little bit behind on actually recording for it, but still on pace. And today, The Conjuring. And at first, when this one came up on my Netflix roulette, I had to stop and think, have I talked about this one? Because I thought I talked about this one. But I double checked, and the answer is no. I have not yet talked about The Conjuring. I mean, I've talked around The Conjuring. I've mentioned in having liked The Conjuring. And I've touched on many films from the Conjuring verse. I've done Annabelle Comes Home. I've done The Curse of La Llorona. And I did The Nun. But haven't actually done The Conjuring. Now, I don't know about you guys, but right now the Conjuring verse is feeling a bit overplayed, overhyped, overtalked. Everyone's gone on about the Conjuring. And it's getting to the point where it's becoming kind of, I guess, overexposed. Well, I was kind of feeling that. So when this one came up, I thought, oh, really? I have to watch The Conjuring again? Because I've seen this movie many times. I saw this in theaters. But I thought, okay, it's come up. I liked it enough. Sure, let's put it on. And I think I was being a little unfair. Now, when The Conjuring first came out, I loved it. I did. And I've seen it several times since then, but always kind of enjoyed it. But it's been several years now since I've last sat down to watch it. But with how much it's come up with now 3 Annabelle movies, The Nun, 2 more Conjurings, which I've not even yet seen the third, and The Curse of La Llorona, none of which were as good as the original. Conjuring 2 did decent, I will say, if memory serves. It's been even longer since I've seen that one. And Annabelle Comes Home was fun, but I can't say it was great. And Annabelle Creation was good, but again, not great. So the weight of the Conjuring verse has kind of been pulling it down a little bit. And I don't know if that's really fair, because now I've sat down, I gave it a rewatch, and I still really did enjoy it. It does hold up, even knowing how familiar it's become. With how familiar the franchise is, the original still does do decent. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the story at this point, and despite that, I was still feeling some apprehension in some of the scenes, despite knowing what was going on. I think a lot of that comes from the performances and just the music and atmosphere. This movie really does do well on it. And it's pretty much rated R just because the critics, or the ratings board at the time just couldn't justify giving it a lower rating because of intensity, and I get that. There's nothing really in this movie that is technically worth the R rating. A little bit of blood here or there towards the end, maybe, but anyway. The reason I'm holding up this one, I did actually pull this up on my streaming roulette and just watched it there, but I do own a copy, so it gives me something to shake at the camera, which I like doing. Anyway, now, if you are actually been under a rock and don't know the Conjuring verse or the Conjuring, well, let's start at the front here. This one details the ghost hunters, demonologists, Lorraine and Ed Warren, played by Vera Farmiga and Farmiga, pronouncing that terribly, and Patrick Wilson. And this is based on some of their actual case files. Now, a lot of the cases have been either debunked or have been overplayed for the real life aspect, so that just ignore the based on true story part and just, if you just enjoy it as a horror film, it works better. Now, this is supposedly one of their evilest cases, so they don't like to talk about it, so they made a movie about it. Anyway, essentially a family, married couple, and their 5 daughters move into a new house in the woods and things immediately start going all Amityville on them. And that was actually kind of a, now that I'm watching this again, I was kind of getting an Amityville vibe. It's because back in the 70s, because this movie's set in the 70s and it's very 70s. And a lot of the haunted house aspects look kind of familiar. But they do them well. They do them very well. It starts off nice and subtle and does have a good build, which really works for it. Particularly some of the hide and seek scenes as the kids are exploring the house and creepy things start happening. So, a lot of that worked very well. And as things go on, they call in Ed and Lorraine Warren they're getting desperate for help as people are starting to get hurt. And they realize the house is essentially being haunted by a witch who killed her own child, sacrificing it to the devil before hanging herself on the property, cursing anyone who would take her land. And now that they're there, she's trying to make history repeat and drive the mother to do terrible things. So, now, what works in this movie? Whew, atmosphere, subtlety. This movie does very good when it's being subtle. Occasionally it'll do an over-the-top thing that does still work, but the slow mounting dread this movie can have works very well. The Annabelle scenes at the beginning, in particular, are terrifying. Now, this is before Annabelle became a pop icon and overplayed. This was her first appearance, and they barely use her. She's in the first 10 minutes tops. Probably not even. And that's all she needed to get her own 3-movie franchise. And I will say she did deserve some more attention. I don't know if she's been done justice, really, but that was some of the freakiest stuff in the movie. And they hit you with it pretty quick. Now, I will say making this a period piece for the 70s, the movie came out in 2013. You can't tell too well. It's the haircuts, the cars, the wood paneling, it's all there. It's very 70s. Now, another thing I like is the lack of skepticism. Usually you get these movies, you got the horror movie dad who's all deny, downplay. In this case, not so much. Yeah, he isn't there for some of it, but he's quick to get help as he sees how terrified his family is. And even he realizes some strange things were happening. So, I like that they don't try and just ignore it. They immediately start trying to figure it out and get help. So, if I were to get nitpicky on a few complaints, there's barely many. Bathsheba, the witch in question, is a very standard design. I will say there's some creepy imagery of her, particularly when you can't see her face, where she's just kind of hanging in the background. Those are spooky scenes. But when you're just getting close-ups on her face, she does look a little Halloween. In-store witch. Which, okay, but it's not a great design, but it's not a terrible one. Her eyes do work. The glare she has is good. But the rest of the face is like, okay. But it's only when it's lingering on her that it doesn't really work. But otherwise, overall, a very solid movie. I do have to give this one a glowing review still. And this is after me having seen it plenty of times and even being a little tired of the universe at this point. The original still, I will give 5 MacGuffins to. Conjuring is a great movie. It still deserves its position there. Just because it has a huge universe weighing it down shouldn't be held against it. I mean, the Halloween sequels, most of them are not good films, but Halloween is still a very great movie. So, I'm not going to let the weight of sequelitis take away from it. Conjuring still holds up. It does. I'm a big fan of James Wan's work. He's kind of 50-50 on when he's producing, but when he's directing, he's good. Not bad on the writing aspect either, but when he's in the director's chair, you're in good hands for a horror film. Alright, so that's all for this one. I'll try to have my movie for the 5th done, watched, and recorded a little sooner. Alright, well, have a good night, everybody. I think that's all I got on this one.